Incredible twist. Black Maid stole billionaire's fortune. Discover how she transformed a dying family legacy into a path of empowerment. The echo of luxury surrounded Aisha Thompson as she meticulously dusted the ornate chandeliers of the Prescott mansion. For years, she dedicated herself to the family, invisible yet essential, her dreams tethered tightly to the polished floors she scrubbed. But everything shifted when Mrs. Prescott fell ill, chaos engulfing the house, like a dark cloud shadowing her ambitions. Aisha was thrust into the heart of turmoil, managing the household while grieving the once vibrant matriarch, the woman who had given little thought to the talent hidden beneath Aisha's apron. In the frenzied aftermath, Aisha stumbled upon the family's financial records crammed within a neglected desk drawer. A knot twisted in her stomach as she leafed through alarming transactions, careless investments risking their immense wealth. The Prescotts, her employers, her unacknowledged family, were on the brink of losing everything. Should she rise as a beacon of truth and expose their reckless mismanagement that could irrevocably change her life? Or should she remain silent, safeguarding the elusive safety net they represented, though deep down they saw her as merely a maid? As doubt crept in, echoes of her mother's sacrifices thundered through her mind. Memories collided, her mother working night shifts to keep them afloat, hiding their struggles from the world while pushing Aisha to excel in school. Aisha's own brilliance with numbers went unnoticed, buried beneath the layers of privilege that surrounded her daily. She was a ghost in the mansion, overlooked, her capabilities drowned in whitewashed silence. Each day, she scrubbed floors and cooked meals, her dreams floating just above her reach like the gentle breeze through the grand windows, whispering promises unfulfilled. Amidst the backdrop of anxiety in the hospital waiting room, Aisha could hardly breathe. Her plan was tumultuous, a desperate gamble. She would confront the Prescotts about their disastrous financial decisions, offering her insight, her only leverage that could bind their fortunes, hers included. But with the weight of their lives on her shoulders, the implications of her revelation sent shivers down her spine. Would her loyalty turn into betrayal? As she envisioned delivering the proposal, a tremor ran through her fingers, a war of conscience raging inside her mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Aisha's resolve stirred as she prepared to lift the veil of silence. Each word she planned to utter carried with it the potential to shatter the delicate balance of her existence. Could she expose the truth that would either set her free or obliterate her world? The thought tightened her chest as she struggled against an impending sense of doom. The Prescotts had overlooked her talent. Perhaps it was time they finally recognized her worth. She stood at the precipice, her heart racing, caught between the shadows of her past and the swirling chaos of the present. With her hand trembling above the proposal, Aisha faced the storm of her choices, all or nothing, her voice trapped, as the weight of defining a new path threatened to crush her underfoot. The air hung thick with tension, each pulse of her heart drumming a tattoo of desperation. Would this be her defining moment, or a perilous misstep? Aisha inhaled sharply, each breath thick with the weight of her decision. She could hear the sickly beeping of the hospital monitors in the background, a stark reminder that life could change irrevocably in mere moments. Just as she steeled herself to speak, images of Mrs. Prescott's laugh, her vibrant warmth, and the care she'd shown Aisha flooded her mind. It felt almost traitorous to conjure the thought of confronting the Prescotts with hard truths. But wouldn't her silence be just as much a betrayal? Tremors of doubt brushed against her resolve as she thought through the potential fallout. Could the family she had served trust her again after sharing their incompetence? As she weighed her choices, Aisha wasn't just considering their financial stability. She was questioning her own worth. Was she merely a survivor clinging to their coattails, or could she actually navigate this troubled sea? The decision crystallized as a surge of audacity coursed through her. She wasn't just a maid, she was capable. With that clarity, she turned away from the financial documents, her eyes locking onto the worn photograph of the Prescott family displayed prominently on a mahogany shelf. Their faces beamed with joy, oblivious to the impending storm. Aisha vowed that they wouldn't find themselves adrift. The plan formed in her mind, intricate and unnerving. She would address Mrs. Prescott first. The illness had stripped away some of the barriers, a clear line drawn between them in terms of status, and perhaps in that space, Aisha would find an authentic connection to share her insights. Just as she made her mental notes, a familiar voice broke through her reverie. It was Jim, the family's accountant, calling out regarding some paperwork. His unexpected arrival sent a jolt of anxiety through her, a reminder of how precariously the situation rested. "Hey Aisha, do you have a moment?" he asked, his casual demeanor giving nothing away. Aisha's heart raced. Confronting him was an unwelcome twist in her burgeoning plan. "Of course, Jim," she replied, suppressing a tremor in her voice as she fought against the feeling that he could easily dismiss her efforts. "What's on your mind?" As he explained the tasks piling up, Aisha focused intently, using the conversation to sharpen her instincts. What had once felt insurmountable now took shape. She could weave her financial acumen into their dialogue. Each detail he mentioned about the family's dwindling investments ignited her determination further. If Jim, with all his education, failed to notice the financial mismanagement, perhaps she, grounded by necessity, could uncover solutions beyond this moment. By the time Jim left, Aisha felt an electric sense of control course through her. Approaching the Prescotts wouldn't be reckless. It would be strategic. She knew this wasn't merely about saving the family fortune, it was about validating her expertise and redefining her identity. As she prepared herself that evening, rehearsing what she might say, a flicker of excitement overshadowed the dread. This was her moment for transformation. When the sun peeked through the mansion's tall windows the next morning, Aisha positioned herself at the heart of the kitchen, a place where she had always felt assured yet invisible. Today, however, she was ready to emerge from the shadows. Fueled by a newfound clarity and resolve. As she adjusted the proposal's format on her tablet, shaking off the last remnants of fear, Aisha couldn't help but wonder how Mrs. Prescott would react. Would she allow herself to see Aisha not just as help, but as an indispensable ally in navigating the storm? The moment of truth was drawing near. Aisha took a deep breath, releasing the air slowly, filled with anticipation of what lay ahead. Today could alter the course of her life forever, but she couldn't ignore the gravity of the crossroads she stood upon. In that silence, the kitchen buzzed alive as she wished for courage from the world around her. And then she heard the footsteps. Today would not mark just a routine turning point. It was the ignition of deep professional courage. The air thickened once more, waiting to see whether she would finally embrace the power that had quietly whispered within her all along. Would Mrs. Prescott recognize her worth, or would this be a revelation too hard for all involved to accept? Aisha's heart pounded in her chest as the footsteps approached, each sound amplifying her already heightened sense of tension. She had imagined this moment countless times, working through the speech in her mind, filtering through all the nuances of her proposal. But as the door creaked open to reveal Mrs. Prescott, her mouth felt parched, and the words lodged themselves somewhere deep in her throat. "Good morning, Aisha," Mrs. Prescott greeted warmly, her frail voice a stark contrast to the vibrancy Aisha remembered. Her eyes, though dimmed by fatigue, still held a flicker of the kindness that once radiated throughout the mansion. "I trust you've been well?" "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott," Aisha managed to reply, her voice steadier than she felt. "I came to talk about the family's finances." Those words hung in the air, almost foreign on her tongue, yet they carried an undercurrent of authority that surprised her. Mrs. Prescott blinked slowly, the weight of that statement settling in the room. "Finances? Is there an issue?" Aisha inhaled deeply, the rush of adrenaline sharpening her focus. This was it. She stepped closer, so her determination could drown out the flickers of doubt trying to resurface. "Yes. I believe there are significant concerns regarding your investments and the management of estate funds. I've taken some time to analyze the recent reports." Her voice trailed off as Mrs. Prescott's expression shifted from curiosity to anxiety. "This isn't easy to discuss," Aisha continued, feeling that familiar tremor return, but it was quickly overshadowed by a newfound conviction. "But if nothing changes, the entire family could find themselves in a precarious situation." Mrs. Prescott looked lost, a lifetime of privilege now feeling like a glass fragile enough to shatter. "You think you can help?" She searched Aisha's face for any hint of bravado that might crumble under pressure. "I do," Aisha said, her own surprise echoing in her mind. "I've seen patterns that suggest unnecessary risks have been taken. If we look at things with a fresh perspective, we could stabilize the estate." The silence draped heavily between them, the kitchen surrounding them filled with busy sounds, blenders whirring, and ovens beeping, yet Aisha felt suspended in time. In that moment, she wasn't just an employee, she was an agent of change, capable of steering the ship in a storm. After a beat, Mrs. Prescott nodded, her expression shifting slightly from apprehension to reluctant hope. "All right, Aisha. Show me." As Aisha unveiled her carefully crafted proposal, her confidence blossomed like newly opened petals after a harsh winter. She detailed her findings, illuminating the path from tendrils of despair to rays of possibility. Each argument resonated, interspersed with exuberant hypothetical scenarios of how to restore the family's financial integrity. With each passing moment, Aisha felt herself grow. This was not merely about the Prescotts. It was the manifestation of her own dreams, aspirations, and the ambition to dismantle the barriers that had long confined her. She could see Mrs. Prescott leaning in, her initial skepticism melting away like early morning mist in the sunlight. However, the jubilation that sparked within Aisha was met with the reality of what lay ahead. Both their fates were interlinked. The very estate she was working to save might not even be in the family's control anymore if the financial mismanagement had been allowed to fester unchecked. Not without consequence. "What happens if this doesn't work?" Mrs. Prescott posed suddenly, genuine fear cutting through the burgeoning optimism. "We'll make it work," Aisha replied, her voice steadier than the tumult within. "We can revamp strategies, engage new advisors, but first, we need to face what's left unspoken between the lines." And as they pored over the details further, Aisha found herself caught between the exhilaration of discovery and the weight of responsibility. The morning light streaming through the kitchen offered no guarantees. Every revelation was laden with potential risk. Still, she pressed on, her voice emerging stronger as she dissected fiscal strategies and projections. She refused to relent. Believing wholeheartedly in the merit of her insights became her shield against the tightening fear of failure. But a chilling thought began to creep in: had she just opened a door, or had she unleashed something far more significant than financial disclosures? The conflict of ambition versus loyalty weighed heavily on her conscience. Would Mrs. Prescott accept the truth even as it threatened to unravel their past? As Aisha wrapped up her presentation, the atmosphere hung thick with tension. She could sense the moment was shifting, not just for the Prescott family, but for herself. She was at the precipice of revitalization, forging a new identity not anchored by servitude but fueled by empowerment. "Are you ready to confront the truth, Mrs. Prescott?" Aisha asked, stealing her gaze. The answer was still unclear, But the stakes had never felt higher. In the charged silence, Aisha wondered, would the truth bring them closer or tear them apart? Aisha held her breath, the room pulsating with an electrifying charge. She gleaned from Mrs. Prescott's hesitant expression that the decision seemed to hinge on a fragile balance of hope and trepidation. Was she ready to unravel an entire narrative woven by years of tradition and privilege? Mrs. Prescott finally broke the silence, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. The truth? It's never straightforward in our world, Aisha. There was a tremor in her voice, a dissonance that echoed Aisha's quiet doubts. Aisha gathered her resolve. While it may not be straightforward, it is essential. Ignoring it won't mend what is broken. She noted a fleeting flicker of fear in Mrs. Prescott's eyes, but there was something else, too, a flicker of acknowledgement, as if Mrs. Prescott could sense the inevitability of change brewing precisely in this moment. "Tell me what I don't want to hear," Mrs. Prescott finally said, her voice steady despite the weight of her choice. Aisha drew in a deep breath, her own heart racing. "Your investments have markedly underperformed, and there are costs accumulating like stagnant water in a pond. If we don't act immediately and decisively, the Prescott legacy could drown under the weight of its own negligence." Each word crystallized the urgency of the moment, transforming the abstract concerns into palpable risks. "And what if we do act? What will it cost our family?" Mrs. Prescott's visage betrayed a storm of emotion, a struggle between the desire to cling to the past and the realization that the future was upon them. "It might cost us the comfort of ignorance, but it could breathe life into your legacy." Aisha infused her voice with conviction. "We can redefine the narrative, ensuring security for the future generations." Something shifted within Mrs. Prescott. She seemed to contemplate the vastness of what was at stake. Aisha felt that shift as if it were tangible, spreading through the air and igniting hope against the daunting horizon. As discussions unfolded, ideas gained momentum. Mrs. Prescott began to frame her thoughts aloud, considering potential partnerships and restructuring initiatives that Aisha had proposed. They debated the merits of unconventional investment avenues, strategically outlining a path that could revitalize not only the finances, but perhaps even the very fabric of the family's legacy. What began as fear morphed into tentative enthusiasm, at least for Aisha. The prospect of tangible change bolstered her spirit, igniting the passion that had been buried for far too long. Yet, lurking beneath each positive exchange was an increasing anxiety. With every step forward, Aisha felt the weight of new expectations she had placed on herself, for if this was going to work, she would need to carry both herself and Mrs. Prescott on this journey. At the same time, a stark realization dawned on her. This was just a professional endeavor. She was pulling the curtain back on a deeply entrenched lifestyle, one that had defined them both in myriad ways. She understood she had to be unwavering in her resolve, prepared to confront fears not just of failure, but of illuminating long-buried truths. "Aisha," Mrs. Prescott said suddenly, her eyes glistening with a mix of vulnerability and determination, "if we pull this off, we won't just save a financial structure. We'll have to reckon with who we are to each other, and the roles we've played in the shadows of this estate." Aisha's heart rate quickened. "Every unresolved relationship has the potential for transformation, Mrs. Prescott," she said, her own conviction echoing her words. "Whether we embrace it or ignore it determines our legacy." The conversation took a sudden turn. Aisha could feel the weight of that evolution bearing down on her. Whatever bond had hung delicately between them was dissolving like morning mist, replaced by the budding creation of a new reality. She found herself not only seeking the financial redemption of the Prescott estate, but also redefining her relationship with Mrs. Prescott, a fellow traveler, no longer merely an employer, but a partner in the quest for survival. Could she envision a future where she stood alongside Mrs. Prescott, not in servitude but in shared responsibility? Each idea, each strategic plan, felt more vital than the last, but the moral complexity of their relationship loomed ominously. "Are we ready for this, Mrs. Prescott?" Aisha asked, swallowing her doubts, looking expectantly into her employer's soulful gaze. "Yes, Aisha. We are," Mrs. Prescott replied. There was resolve woven through her words now, yet that conviction didn't entirely quiet the unease coiling within Aisha. Would the impending changes come easily, or would they bring unexpected consequences? As she pondered the uncertainty of their intertwined fates, a lingering unease settled in her stomach, a compelling force pushing her to question how far she was willing to go to harness this formidable momentum. And as they forged ahead, Aisha confronted a haunting realization. Had she unintentionally entrusted her own future to the very hand that had once held her captive in a hierarchical divide? Would they both emerge empowered, or had she merely opened a Pandora's box? Aisha awoke the next morning to a mix of anxiety and anticipation, the threads of her new reality intertwining in her mind. She realized the weight of her ambition pressed heavily against her chest, yet the prospect of change coursed through her like a potent elixir. Today was about more than just numbers. It represented a courageous leap into the unknown. As she prepared for the day, Aisha stood in front of the mirror, inspecting her reflection. She noticed a flicker of determination in her own eyes, a reflection she hadn't seen before. For too long, she had been an observer in the world of finance, adapting to the shadows of others' successes. Now, she was the catalyst for change, a force pushing the envelope on tradition. Arriving at Prescott Manor, the air was thick with expectation. Mrs. Prescott had summoned a series of meetings with key stakeholders, and Aisha understood her role as more than an advisor. She was the architect of their revival. As they settled into the sprawling, sunlit conference room adorned with family portraits that loomed above like silent guardians, Aisha felt a renewed sense of agency. These portraits were reminders of legacies she was about to reshape. The initial discussions left Aisha on edge. Each voice echoed the cautious whispers of tradition, drenched in skepticism about the strategies she advocated. Some board members scoffed at the idea of reallocating resources into untested markets and newer, more dynamic ventures. "Are we really considering abandoning what has worked for decades?" one of them challenged, his skepticism ripe with disdain. Aisha swallowed hard, her palms clammy against the polished table. "With respect, what has worked is crumbling. We are standing on borrowed time. The world outside has transformed. We must transform or face extinction." Her voice cracked slightly, revealing the urgency of her words. Their legacy could not thrive in denial. Mrs. Prescott's gaze met Aisha's, a silent acknowledgment of the shared battle ahead. Aisha could sense a crack forming in the rigid facade of the board members. A subtle shift in openness to challenge the status quo. It was exhilarating, but every victory felt like a step into a treacherous canyon. As the meeting continued, Aisha deftly navigated through resistance. She tapped into her analytical acumen, presenting data-driven projections that underscored the potential rewards of their newfound direction. With each statistic, she dismantled the mountain of tradition one stone at a time, but her heart raced under the pressure. Could she truly steer this ship through choppy waters? "What do you propose specifically, Aisha?" a board member inquired, shifting the atmosphere from skepticism to curiosity. A ripple of intrigue blossomed across the room. Aisha seized the moment. "We can invest in renewable energy and tech innovations. We're not only addressing market demands, but aligning with the world's evolving consciousness. It's about sustainability and redefining our identity." The words flowed with conviction, breaking the glassy sternness of the room. Yet, as the dialogue progressed, she felt the stirrings of self-doubt creeping back. Was she stepping beyond her bounds? Who was she to challenge seasoned investors who had survived for decades? The old label of the background player clung to her like a heavy coat, suffocating her newfound ambition. Aisha dared to reckon with these feelings, tapping into the depth of her resilience. Later that day, Mrs. Prescott and Aisha found themselves alone in the expansive study, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "You held your ground beautifully," Mrs. Prescott commended, while biting on her lip, her admiration mixed with a lingering uncertainty. "But I saw the apprehension in your eyes." "I'm terrified," Aisha confessed, her voice breaking slightly. "What if I'm pushing too hard? What if I fail?" The walls around her suddenly felt suffocating, reflecting her turmoil. Mrs. Prescott leaned forward, earnestness flowing from her. "Aisha, we don't have the luxury of time. Together, we need to accept that we may lose much in pursuit of what matters." What you proposed was daring a leap of faith. Their eyes met in that moment, a fragile connection forged in the fires of uncertainty. Aisha felt a flicker of hope amid the fear. They stood intertwined on the edge of transformation, two women so different yet bound by their shared risk. Would they ignite a revolution, or would their aspirations fizzle into smoke? As Aisha left the study, a profound question pricked at the edge of her consciousness like a thorn. Was she truly ready to take ownership of her own narrative, or would she always succumb to the shadows of others' legacies? The stakes had never felt so high, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aisha began to realize they were all tethered to a fate she could no longer ignore. What price would she pay to ensure her future and that of Mrs. Prescott's legacy? Aisha's thoughts swirled like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind as she headed home that evening. The exhilaration from the day's progress battled the weight of doubt that pressed heavily upon her. She clenched the steering wheel, her knuckles white as she wrestled with the ghost of her past, her self-doubt clashing with her burgeoning ambitions. The pressure to reinvent not just a company, but her own identity bore down like a relentless tide. Once home, the familiar confines felt at once comforting and stifling. Her small apartment, decorated with memories of a modest upbringing, echoed a life spent in the shadows of authority figures. As she kicked off her shoes, the first wave of comfort washed over her, quickly followed by the remnants of frustration. Could she truly emerge from the background? Or was the label she had worn for so long a permanent fixture? The evening routine was a strange juxtaposition of normalcy and the tumult brewing within her. As she boiled water for tea, Aisha found herself pacing, replaying the arguments and counter-arguments from the meeting in her mind. Each decision, each word she had uttered, felt like a pivotal moment, a turning point in a narrative only she could author. But a stubborn voice whispered that perhaps these moments belonged to others whose successes she had always admired, not to her. She picked up her laptop, the cool metal a grounding sensation. With resolve, she opened a document and titled it Vision for Prescott Holdings. As she began to type, her fingers hesitated momentarily, but the urgency gripping her heart ignited the adrenaline of creation. Bullet points outlining her vision for renewable investments flowed into the digital space, echoed in her mind. A burgeoning path stretching into the unknown, waiting for her to carve it out. Just as her thoughts began to crystallize, her phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Prescott. "We need to prepare for tomorrow's presentation. Bring every insight and every piece of data. They'll all be ready for us." Aisha's heart raced. Tomorrow she would stand before the skeptics again, but now armed with her freshly sharpened conviction. That night, as she mapped out strategic forecasts and case studies, a different perspective began to emerge, a defining moment where the past retreated, making way for growth. Through the data, Aisha discovered her hidden talent for interpreting market trends. Each statistic illuminated the possibilities that lay ahead, revealing her aptitude for more than mere analysis. She was on the threshold of becoming a leader in her own right. Sleep came fitfully, her mind replaying dialogue and projections, fighting off an encroaching wave of anxiety about being undermined in the boardroom yet again. What if they dismissed her again? What if she misstepped? The fear of failure lingered, but so did a nascent confidence. She was not merely an advisor stepping toward the precipice. She was an architect, and architects bend steel and defy gravity. The next morning found her dressed in bold economic colors, war paint for the battle ahead, and as she observed herself in the mirror, the flicker of determination had transformed into a steady flame. She steadied her breath, reminding herself of Mrs. Prescott's words about the price they would pay together. As the sun streamed into the conference room once more, she took her place at the forefront, flanked by Mrs. Prescott. The board members were assembled, former skeptics now shifting in their seats, intrigue etched across their faces. Aisha glanced at the data she had prepared, absorbing the familiarity of analysis while anchoring her heart to genuine insight. What will we do today that will determine our fate? She mused internally, raising her eyes to meet the board's gaze. Today, we redefine legacy. With her heart thundering in her chest, she took a deep breath and prepared to present a vision that could either catapult them forward or send them flailing, an unknown awaiting her command. Could she submit her identity as a leader today, or would she falter beneath the weight of tradition once more? The moment swelled with unspoken tension, and she could feel all eyes keenly on her. As the questions loomed tantalizingly over the threshold of her presentation, she braced herself to finally confront not just the board but the lingering shadows of her past. What echoes of her previous self would she have to confront in order to emerge victorious? Aisha's heart rattled like a caged bird as she stood, poised to unleash her carefully crafted vision upon the board. The room felt electric, tension crackling in the air like the spark of an impending storm. She took a steadying breath, gazing at the faces before her, others who had always occupied positions of power. Would they recognize her potential, or would they dismiss her as they had in the past? "Good morning." Her voice rang out, slightly firmer than she felt, an inflection of the confidence she would summon from deep within. "Today, we're not just discussing numbers. We're discussing our future." Each word was laden with resolve, a bridge crafted to connect her past doubts to her present ambitions. Aisha clicked through her carefully prepared slides, the shapes and figures morphing into a narrative of vision buoyant with promise. She noticed the board members exchanging glances, intrigued but guarded. Was it shock or skepticism? She sharpened her focus. "The renewable sector is booming," she continued, feeling her pulse quicken with the rhythm of her heartbeat. "This isn't just about staying relevant, it's about leading the way." Here, she felt a flicker of the architect within her, sketching grand possibilities over a fresh canvas. As she spoke, she caught sight of Mrs. Prescott nodding appreciatively. The older woman had championed her from the shadows, and her faith propelled Aisha's confidence further. Yet, buried deep within, residues of fear and shame lingered. Was she deserving of this platform, or merely an imposter masking as a leader? The board members' reactions varied. Some leaned forward, intrigued, others remained stone-faced. Aisha's worst nightmare loomed. What if she faltered mid-presentation? What if they dissected her arguments, exposing each flaw? The thought gnawed at her, but she clamped down her apprehensions, drawing strength from the data. Numbers were objective. They didn't belong to a past identity, but spoke of an unequivocal truth. Possibilities lay ahead. And here, she gestured to her final slide, are the anticipated returns on investment. Not just financial, but environmental and social. The room held its breath, and time seemed to stretch as she prepared to confront the inevitable questions. "Interesting insights, Aisha," began Mr. Jensen, the most seasoned of the board. "However, do you truly believe our clientele, our investors, are ready to leap into this unknown? It seems ambitious for an organization of our stature." This was the moment she dreaded and longed for. A challenge not merely intellectual, but a confrontation of old prejudices. She could sense the stakes rising. Dismissing her yet again would be like snipping the last thread of her own burgeoning identity. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Jensen," she replied steadily, every word emerging from a place of newfound assurance. However, we stand on the cusp of a revolution. The market is shifting, and we can position ourselves as leaders, not followers. A ripple of murmurs passed around the room, apprehension mixed with curiosity. Aisha pressed on, bolstered by their reaction. She anticipated stubborn resistance, but chose to embrace the discomfort. Perhaps she wouldn't win everyone over today, but she was a force to reckon with. As the questions came, she engaged with each, calibrating her responses, selecting her words with meticulous precision to transform doubts into dialogue. Her transformation became evident. She was no longer pleading for acceptance. She was asserting her place. Deep down, a flicker of awareness ignited, illuminating the remnants of childhood fears she thought she had shed. Her worth was tied to their validation. Surrounding herself with figures of authority had birthed reflexive hesitance, but now here she was rising to confront not just them, but her own narrative. As the presentation drew to a close, instead of merely seeking approval, Aisha felt a sense of triumph swell within. She had ventured into the realm of vulnerability, and every question posed was a stepping stone on her path to leadership. But just as relief washed over her, a chilling voice lanced through the thick air as Mrs. Prescott gently placed her hand on Aisha's back, signaling the gravity of the moment. She turned her head slightly, catching a glimpse of Mr. Jensen, who appeared ready for the next round. "But tell me, Aisha," he challenged, "how prepared are you for the fallout if things don't go as planned? What will you do when faced with failure?" In that moment, Aisha felt the weight of uncertainty crash over her once more. It was a question she thought she had already answered. Yet, as she searched for words, she realized she might just be on the edge of redefining everything, not only for herself but for Prescott Holdings as well. What new revelations would emerge from facing down this uncertainty? Aisha felt her heart pounding in tandem, with a mixture of dread and exhilaration. Mr. Jensen's challenge loomed, a towering specter that questioned not just the merit of her proposal, but the very foundation of her journey thus far. The silence thickened, demanding a response that would not only address the board's skepticism, but also confront her ingrained fears of inadequacy. "Failure," she echoed, the word heavy on her tongue. "It's a predecessor to growth. If this initiative stumbles, it won't be the end, merely a redirection." She inhaled sharply, stealing glances at the faces both scrutinizing and curious. There was something liberating in that acknowledgement. She could admit her fears without letting them control her. "The truth is, I've faced failure before," Aisha continued, allowing her vulnerability to seep into her voice. The memories came rushing back, a botched project during her early years that had haunted her for ages. "What I learned is that the true measure of resilience lies in how we respond to shift in strategy, a recalibration of expectations. This proposal isn't just about immediate success, it's about understanding the journey we're undertaking together." A spark of recognition flickered in some eyes around the table. Aisha felt the tension shift slightly, nudging her confidence forward like a quiet tide. Each board member bore their own scars. Perhaps acknowledging those shared vulnerabilities could forge unexpected connections. She shifted her stance, feeling the power of her narrative. "I stand before you not as a flawless candidate, but as someone who's experienced the sting of falling short and has learned to rise again and again. If we stumble, the important question will be, what do we learn from it?" This reframing transformed her answer into a deeper conversation, and she could sense intrigue mixed with relief reflected in their faces. She had not only countered Mr. Jensen's skepticism, she had invited them into a dialogue about growth, about embracing the unpredictable landscape of business and leadership. "Engaging in this vision is akin to planting seeds," she articulated passionately. "Some will flourish, while others may falter, but ultimately, we nurture them together. That's how we build an empire." Aisha noticed Mrs. Prescott's approving nod and felt her own resolve strengthen. A small part of Aisha that had previously held her back now began to dissolve. Perhaps it wasn't the perfect confidence she sought, but rather a release from the fear of imperfection itself. Casting caution aside, she forged ahead. Imagine this, years from now, we could lead the industry, not just with profitability, but by setting standards in sustainability and community impact. Our failures won't define us. They enrich our story. The boardroom's energy felt alive, crackling with possibilities. Aisha could almost visualize the ripples of her conviction taking form. She was more than a cog in the machine. She was the architect of this endeavor. Then, as though a storm rolled over the atmosphere, Mr. Jensen tilted his head, a flicker of respect in his gauging gaze. That's an ambitious vision, Aisha. But ambition requires more than just words. It requires a clear plan, an exploration of the tangibles that will lead us through the uncertainties. Aisha felt a rush of adrenaline. This was an opportunity, a moment where ambition could translate into actionable strategy. Absolutely, and I'm ready to delve deeper. I propose not only developing this plan collaboratively, but I am committed to addressing its potential pitfalls head-on. Together, let us outline clear strategies for how we can adapt, she said, breaking that invisible barrier. Driven by newfound tenacity, she scribbled down their questions, mentally mapping out variables, and sequencing responses, each idea feeding into the next. The board shifted uneasily, aware now that Aisha was no longer merely trying to fit a mold. She was reshaping it. Before she could fully process the ongoing conversation, Mr. Jensen leaned back, a thoughtful look igniting beneath his stoic demeanor. "All right, then," he said slowly. "If you think you can navigate this path, let's see the initial plan you propose." Every ounce of her previous self-doubt was washed away by the momentum of that moment. Aisha seized it like a lifebuoy thrown in turbulent waters. She had not only thrown down the gauntlet, she realized she had invited the very people who once loomed over her to join in a shared journey, one forged in respect and ambition. Feeling adrenaline coursing through her fingertips, she opened her notebook and prepared to chart the next steps. Little did she know, within this burgeoning pulse of triumph, shadows lurked here too. What unseen obstacles lay ahead as she stepped firmly into her role, shadowed by self-imposed pressure and the unpredictable reactions from allies and foes alike. Aisha's mind raced with ideas as she began outlining the initial steps of her proposal. The energy in the room was palpable. She could feel the board members leaning in, their interest piqued. She was no longer just an employee presenting ideas. She was a leader seizing the moment, demanding seriousness for her vision, and vowing to back it with substance. But beneath the surface of her drive lay the gnawing anxiety of what was at stake. The specter of failure, which she had so eloquently addressed moments before, loomed large again. She took a breath, grounding herself. This was not just about her success, it was about the entire board placing their faith in her. Too many times in her career had she held back, afraid of the repercussions of failure. This time, she needed to harness that fear, not as a weight, but as a catalyst for brilliance. "Let us start with the objectives," she said, jotting down a clear list. "We need to establish key performance indicators that will guide not only our progress, but also our adaptability in the face of challenges." She pointedly made eye contact with Mr. Jensen, acknowledging his earlier doubts without flinching. "From sales projections to sustainability measures, we should be transparent and ready to pivot." The boarders began to push back, raising concerns about the feasibility of her timeline and the realistic expectations they should have. Each question felt like a weight pressing down on her efforts to inspire. The temptation to retreat into uncertainty thread through her mind, but she refused to let it. Instead, she reminded herself that each point of contention was a chance to further solidify her argument. "I understand your concerns," Aisha replied, her voice steady. "But remember my point. Every setback, every bump along our path, is an opportunity to recalibrate. We can't achieve greatness by sticking only to the safest roads. Her words hung in the air. She knew the challenge was immense. She was blind to that. But with each response, a strange amalgamation of fear and resolve blended into creativity within her. As the conversation progressed, Aisha began to notice subtle shifts in the body language of her colleagues. Nods of agreement replaced skeptical glares, and voices that once echoed dissent were now inquiring about strategies she hadn't mentioned. It felt as though they were collectively awakening to her vision, her idea taking root in their minds. The connection was building. They could be allies in this pursuit after all. But just as she began to savor the possibility of a united front, a familiar discouraging voice slipped through the cracks. It was Jacob, his skepticism rooted deep. "Aisha, you know I respect your ambition, but setting these lofty goals without a buffer for failure could spell disaster. Our reputations are on the line." The word stung more than she anticipated. For a moment, doubt found its way back into her mind. Could they actually achieve what they started to envision? Then, she remembered the shard of resolve she had cultivated. She felt a fire spark within her. Her voice lacked any tremor this time. "Jacob, what we must consider is this: playing it safe guarantees that we stagnate. Embracing risk allows us to evolve. If we treat failure as a partner in our journey, we won't just survive. We'll thrive." Each word felt like a bridge, inching towards understanding. This was just a plan. It was a bold stride into uncharted territory. The discussions continued, ebbing and flowing with possibilities and concerns. Aisha anchored the conversation, drawing them toward clarity, as she presented contingency plans for nearly every point of skepticism. She marveled at her ability to transition from the timid junior analyst, who hesitated to share her thoughts, to someone effectively commanding the room. As the meeting drew to a close, a layer of tension lifted, but the lingering question remained: would her vision hold under pressure? Would the board truly rally behind her? She could feel the air buzzing with energy, the dawn of something new unfurling. But just as they were packing up to dismiss, Mrs. Prescott's hand shot up, cutting through the air. "Aisha, what happens if your initial approach does fail? Have you accounted for that?" The room stilled, and a chill crept through her. Here was an unanticipated confrontation, one that dropped a stone into her previously calm waters. Every instinct told her to replay her previous arguments, but the weight of the moment felt different. A choice loomed ahead. Would she shy away from further vulnerability, or would she embrace this test of her growth? With a deep inhale, she began to craft her reply, her mind racing to find the right balance between honesty and strategy, teetering on a precipice that could shift the entire dynamic of her proposal. Aisha Thompson stood at the threshold of a new reality, the pulse of transformation coursing through her, as she prepared to meet the Prescott board once more. Her prior presentation had ignited a flame of possibility, but uncertainty brushed against her like a winter chill. Every question posed to her now felt like a clear echo of where she had started, bound by doubt, cloaked in invisibility. Today, however, she would not shrink back. Today, she would take definitive ownership of her journey. Entering the boardroom, Aisha exchanged fleeting glances with the members who had once overlooked her. Now, she could see a hint of respect nestled in their eyes, a tentative acknowledgment of the competence she had unraveled. As she settled into her chair, the anticipation of another challenge washed over her. Would this be another opportunity to stretch herself, or would she falter at the precipice of ambition yet again? "Let us discuss outcomes," Mrs. Prescott interjected, her voice resonant with authority. "Aisha, tell us your plans for managing potential setbacks. What if this doesn't work as we envisage?" The room held its breath, as Aisha felt the weight of her growth balance decisively on this question. She could sense the skepticism that had previously clung to her, but instead of shying away, she leaned into the moment. Failure isn't our enemy, it's our teacher. Each setback will provide insights. For instance, if initial investments falter, we'll analyze the data, refine our approach. We will pivot quickly, transforming challenges into learning opportunities, she stated, the clarity in her voice, like a lighthouse for the uncertain. A ripple of interest stirred amongst the board members. This wasn't the timid woman they had dismissed. This was a strategist armed with insight. And how will we ensure that our investors are comfortable with such risks? Another board member queried, his voice steady but sympathetic. Aisha straightened her posture, replying with conviction. We'll be transparent. We will develop a clear communication strategy that outlines not just the potential risks, but also our contingency plans. They will see that we are not blindly jumping into uncertainty. We are thoughtfully steering toward a brighter path. Each assertion solidified her new identity and unwavering force. As discussions deepened, Aisha felt her prior self dissolve into the background. One question after another came from the members, revealing cracks in their skepticism. She engaged with enthusiasm, offering insights she had once buried under self-doubt. Let us also outline our success metrics, Aisha suggested, her voice echoing with firm resolution. We'll define milestone achievements so that we can see progress clearly. It will not only guide us, but form a foundation of trust with our stakeholders. She felt their gaze shift from skepticism to intrigued. Questions were replaced with deliberations. Ideas flowed, and in that moment, she no longer felt as if she needed to prove herself. She stood as a respected peer, someone whose insights could shape the future of Prescott Holdings. With each passing moment, the sense of solidarity they shared in this pursuit solidified into a partnership, a testament to her growth. Finally, they settled on a decisive plan, a collaborative initiative that viewed risk as an opportunity for revival rather than a nemesis. The room buzzed with renewed purpose, Aisha at the center, steering the collective vision. She reflected on the journey thus far, not simply a rise from obscurity, but an emergence of her full potential. As the meeting adjourned, Aisha exchanged gratified glances with Mrs. Prescott, who wore a proud smile. "You've found your voice, Aisha," she remarked, her tone imbued with warmth. "And you've revitalized more than just the company. You've revitalized yourself." The acknowledgement sparked a deep resonance within Aisha, a realization that echoed louder than any recognition of her professional acumen. Walking away from the boardroom, Aisha felt a new sense of self taking root. She had transformed not just the financial future of the Prescott legacy, but her own identity from that of the invisible caretaker to a decisive leader. The narrative that once confined her had now shifted into a story of empowerment, one she authored with hard-won knowledge and resilience. Emboldened by her climb, Aisha reflected on this accomplishment. She had conquered self-doubt, navigated the storms of misunderstanding, and emerged with recognition as a competent professional. Confidence swelled within her as she stepped into a new realm of opportunity. Now was the moment to embrace the fruits of her labor. It became crystal clear that Aisha Thompson was not merely an employee. She was an indispensable architect of change within the Prescott legacy. The thankfulness bubbling inside her resonated profoundly. She had definitively shifted the narrative not only for the family whose fortunes she'd uplifted, but for herself, recognizing her true worth and embracing her full potential. Reflecting on her journey and the monumental leap she'd embraced, she knew this was just the beginning of a promising horizon. Now, don't wait another second. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and tell us how you feel about Aisha's journey in the comments below. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative conclusion. Your support is absolutely essential.